and then I will look at your games. Nobody should feel any shame about the games that they are presenting. You have seen me at my very worst many, many times on this site. And if anybody is to feel shame, it really probably should be me or somebody. But, well, Ace Rook actually probably. But that's not the point. The point is yes, give me your games and I will look at them and try and say things. And we'll see where this goes. At least maybe something will be learned or knowledge will be gleaned. Does not matter if they are winning or losing. That is completely irrelevant. Winning games are just as telling of mistakes that one makes as losing games. Sometimes more so because one subconsciously doesn't notice the mistakes one makes. There's an urge amongst us all to ignore the mistakes that we make in the games that we win, which is dangerous. It's very, very important when you're looking at your games to try and be critical of them, even if you win. But there's a tendency to want to have played a good game and therefore ignore the mistakes in games that we win. So in any case, let's start with the game that I had against Chess Explained, which is not a particularly, I don't think it's that interesting game. And so, but I will go over it very, very quickly from my perspective. No criteria, simply a game that you felt that you, for whatever reason, wanted feedback on. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be the most brilliant game ever played. There's no criteria other than your own personal wish to discuss the game with other people. That's basically it. For whatever reason. So, all right. Chess Explained was good enough to play me on his stream. It was the last game of his stream. He was probably tired. And chess games in general tend to be silly when they're blitz. So, But here was the game. What I found interesting about the game was simply that I watched his stream afterwards, not during, and found some of his comments interesting because they weren't necessarily what I expected or didn't expect. But although, to be honest, a lot of it was what I expected. But that's not the point. Here's the game. We'll look at it from... I like looking at it from white perspective because I'm just used to, even when it's a game that I played as black. So we're going to flip the board. How do I flip the board? Oh, well, that's right. Sorry. Okay. Most games are blundering tactics, but I think one thing that's very important to recognize is a lot of those blunders are brought on by getting into difficulties before the actual blunder itself. And a lot of times, if we can avoid those difficulties before we get to the blunder, we're much less likely to make the blunders. Because there's a lot of positions where we're very unlikely to blunder in. I would say, actually, this game against Chess Explained was a good example of that. I didn't really have an opportunity to blunder that much. I mean, this game it was a 0-0-0 game where the computer says you didn't make any inaccuracies, mistakes, or blunders. But the reason for that wasn't that I played particularly brilliantly. It was simply that the position wasn't one where there was the propensity to blunder a lot. But, okay. So, alright. So, Chess Explained is just playing a very... Alright, so this is all very normal. I'll explain this from the ground up a little bit, because I'm not sure what level everybody is in this channel, or how much experience they have in these. So, D4... I won't be explaining that. But D6, the system that with D6, if system is really quite a term for the first move of the game, is a bit flexible. There's a lot of different ways this could go by playing D6 first. First off, there's immediately a psychological gambit. Hi, Drachmo. The psychological gambit is whether or not white will follow with E4. Because E4 takes you into a completely different type of setup. But if somebody plays... Usually when the first player plays D4, they're not expecting to play E4 as a follow-up. Because just generally black prevents it. One way or another. I mean, the standard responses to d4 tend to be knight f6 or d5, or perhaps c5. Well, I don't know about c5, but basically all or f5. All of these more or less inhibit the playing of e4. So generally, if you're playing d4, you're often going into a system where you're not playing. I mean, sorry, if you're playing d4, you're often psychologically not intending to play a system where you play e4. Another reason for this is a great deal, including Chess Explained, of players, especially the strong positional sort, tend to play c4, knight c3, g3, and bishop g2 with queenside pressure because of the presence of pawns over there and the pieces moving in that direction. Thank you, Bill. The point here is that all of these moves, none of these moves are really helped by the presence of a pawn on e4. The pawn on e4 often turns these positions into what would you call it? Open games that don't. The pawn doesn't help any of the queenside play. It actually inhibits. The bishop is blocked by the pawn. And it can be a target. To give an example, very often. Oh, have fun with Star Wars. All right. To give an example of what I'm talking about, very often you'll see something like this. Or how many? Oh, this is a little bit tricky to explain. Well, okay. Actually, a better way to explain it would be like this. Sometimes you'll see in the English. Don't even know. Yeah, okay. Sometimes you'll see in the English things like this. Or let's say that black doesn't even play knight f6 because we want to. The idea is we're explaining about d4. So say you get something like this. In a position like this, an obvious move would be to play e4. But a great number of players will not do so. Because the major reason, in fact, the stronger the player is, often the less likely that they'll play e4 in this position. Because that turns it into basically a Sicilian, when if you simply play g3 and you put your bishop here, your bishop is uninhibited by a pawn here that can at any time at a later stage probably move to e4 if that's actually useful to do. But basically, you'll see that, it's just not a d4-like kind of way of playing to throw the pawn to e4. That's more, if you're going to put the pawn on e4, you do it on move 1. So, okay. My point here, and I'm not explaining it terribly well, is that let's not discuss Star Wars for frick's sake. Alright, okay. The point here is that a lot of people who play d4 are doing so with they already have a strategy in mind which doesn't really involve e4. So, yeah, I mean, it's obviously people do play it, but the majority of the time, white won't play e4 in response to this. So if you play d6 in response to d4, you don't have to worry too much about the possibility of this, and then you have basically a Pirsch or something. You don't have to play knight f6, but still, a Pirsch or a modern defense or something, or a Philidor. But yes, so the point is that this doesn't happen as often as you'd expect. That said, I find the stronger the player is as white, the more likely that they are able and willing to change their entire opening to something like that on move 2, and to call your bluff, as it were. The same thing happens. I used to play e6 against d4, and the same thing happens here. You're basically bluffing. You're saying that I don't believe that you want to play a French defense because if you did, you probably wouldn't have opened with d4. And sometimes people will call that bluff, and the fact is that that's awful when that happens to me because I don't know how to play the French defense for shit. So basically, if I play e6 against d4, I'm kind of fucked, actually, at this point, because I don't know how to play the French defense as black. So, I mean, what if the pawn d6 was... I don't know. By the way, e6 is also a useful psychological gambit, because if your opponent doesn't play e4 and plays, say, c4, the most obvious move that he'd play that isn't e4, at this point, you could transpose into an English defense, which is a fun opening. But the point is that, yeah, none of the... Yeah, you're basically taking a risk. So, in any case, d6. As you can see, Chess Explained, a very strong player, international master, does not play e4, but that's fine. It's not necessary to. He just sticks with his system. You'll find that a lot of very strong players have systems that they want to always play, that they're just comfortable with, that it isn't that they get a great position, they get a good position, they get a decent position, and they're comfortable with it. And that's much more important than whether the computer says you're a centi pawn off from the ideal position or something, because yeah, comfort matters, especially in blitz. Oh, well, the English defense, yeah, I mean, well, no, I was talking about the English defense, Owen, which is characterized by basically this. Usually the English defense is actually a defense to the English opening, that is like this. And then like that. This is a fun opening, by the way. It's just very, very chaotic, where a massive amount of pressure is created, and then you can have things like this happening. But I am digressing massively. So, alright. So, knight f3. Alright, so now we get basically my general way of reacting when white plays in a less aggressive fashion. The first thing I do generally is, if white is not playing hyper aggressively, I'm less liable to develop my knight to f3 immediately. And I'm more liable to reserve it for a more fancy route, which is often to h6. This may seem stupid, and in fact often is, but the point is that if your opponent is not putting immediate pressure on you, you have a little bit more leeway, latitude, to do things like that. So in any case, also, we're playing for the e5 push. That's been happening ever since I played d6. You notice that there are a few definite advantages to d6 and e5 as a way of combating the white center versus, say, if you had played e6 and d5. D6 and d5 makes it so you can't fee and kettle your bishop, because otherwise you get a big weak square on f6. And also you block in your light square bishop. In this case, both bishops are pretty active. And the e5 pawn tends to be useful way of increasing more pressure along this diagonal. So I prefer this setup to playing solidly on the light squares with moves like this, this, and this. But that's not really... I mean, it's not that one's better or worse. They both have drawbacks. So in any case. Alright, so bishop g4. I'll tell you a secret right now, because I play this all the time, and this is what I call the ZugBag system, although it's really just a bad version of a Averbach or King's Indian type of, but that's not the point. The point is that, or modern or whatever, the point is this, this move that I would say is my kind of contribution to this opening, which is a terrible contribution, is not good. It's not good, and there's a very simple reason why it's not good that I very rarely see people avail themselves of. And it's very, very simple, but somehow it's just people don't do it because they're not used to it. So I'm going to tell you a secret, and this is sad because it means that anytime I play this move, people will play the right move against it. But this move has no meaning. The only meaning it has is that it inhibits g3, which Chess Explained played anyhow, or pushing the e-pawn, because then the bishop has meaning because it's actually pinning the knight. Black's play in this opening almost invariably revolves around putting sufficient pressure on d4 to create counterplay against white's, slightly imposing center. So basically, this bishop has, well, it has some meaning because it's hitting the knight, which is supporting d4. But if white simply plays h3, then black actually tends to be in a bad way. And the reason is because he hasn't pushed his e-pawn. So after bishop takes knight, pawn takes, if I play a move like this, hoping to generate pressure against d4, he just simply plays e3 and laughs. White will follow with f4, bishop g2, possibly castling, and he has a fantastic position because he has the two bishops and a very solid center. Notice how useful it was to keep the e-pawn back because it now can only go one square to here. This is very different from, say, if you play, say you play e4 here. Then all of these things work far better for black because after moves like this, we play knight d4, and the knight actually tends to become bothersome because we have no simple way to drive it away. We could play a move like this, but then with the bishop takes, this knight is very strong. And if white takes pains to try and remove it, well, often it's not even possible to do without, doing obviously anti-positional things like bishop takes knight, and which would make the black pawn super strong and the bishop even better. So, although it's funny because it looks like this pawn might be in trouble, but it almost never is. Here, if takes, we could actually even take this way, and if here, we have this incredibly annoying check because the queen can't interpose because that would lose the knight. All right. But my opinion about all this is that after bishop g4, there's no move for white that's particularly good except, although sometimes white will play this, and then we get a lot of fun. This sometimes happens. But I believe in black's position here. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn on the queen side, but I believe in black's position here. But if you simply play h3 after takes, white just has a really nice position, in my opinion. This pawn damage to the pawn structure is minimal. So, but you'd almost never see white play that. Almost invariably, you see white play e4 or bishop f4. All moves that play all moves that play into bishop g4 being meaningful. So, just take that for what it is. In any case, Chess Explained played g3, which I found remarkable because he didn't seem to be bothered by the possibility of bishop takes knight at all. I found that interesting because this, to me, is actually the move that is most cooperative when mixed with the move bishop g4. I mean, it seems to give black more what he wants than any other move that white could play that isn't an outright blunder. Because after bishop takes knight, white has to take with the e-pawn. And now there's no e-pawn to support the pawn on d4, which is obviously the target of black's counterplay. And in fact, in this position, I think black could have simply played... I'm not sure why I didn't simply play here, because that looks quite good. But it doesn't matter. The point is that this move is also quite good. And it's obvious that white has issues with the d4 square. So I find that interesting, that he didn't seem to be at all perturbed. Yeah, it's called the rat defense, also the modern defense. Rat defense is more of a, an informal term for it. I don't know why. The internet sometimes doesn't understand opening names properly. And so, you'll have chess sites that will give legitimacy to, informal, silly names for openings. Professional chess players do not normally officially call the modern defense the rat. That's just a joke name for it. But the internet has lent it credibility, so now it's officially called the rat defense, which is kind of funny. But in any case, so in the video, in Chess Explained's video of the day, where he was talking about his thoughts about the game as he was playing it, to some degree, he seemed to not be particularly perturbed by any of this. But in my opinion, white is already given black something that he sort of wants. But it might be I am being overly optimistic. In any case, d4, knight d4, and then the move bishop h3, which I found to be strange. What I expected was simply bishop e3, but I guess Chess Explained didn't like the idea of knight f5, making the bishop have to move again, probably. And so he decided to first make the prophylactic bishop h3 to prevent knight f5. But at this point, it's quite obvious that white's pieces are on some somewhat funny squares. So, all right, h5 seems the obvious thing to do, although I spent a lot of time on it. But seems obvious to do this with a bishop right here as a target. Bishop e3. The whole point of white's play is that this knight can be undermined if it doesn't have a natural retreat square. Knight h5 would be a terrible move here. Almost certainly a very bad move, because the damage to black's kingside would be pretty bad. But okay, it might not be the worst move actually, knight h5. But okay, the point is just c5 is obvious. Takes. All right. So my knight has to retreat, but at the cost of white's center. So both sides have something to something to be happy about. Black has a really strong bishop and natural pieces. White has the two bishops, and that's okay, all right. So, and slight space advantage, I guess. But all right, so castles, h4, bishop drops back. All right. Okay, so these are just natural developing moves. I don't want a castle kingside because I've already opened the H file, and I would like to generate some sort of attacking play. Bear in mind, if you are the one without the two bishops, if your opponent has the two bishops and you have the knights, sometimes it's better to attack because the knights are useful as attacking pieces. The bishops tend to be... The bishop pair tends to grow in strength as you move towards an endgame. The bishop pair could be useful in the middle game, definitely, no question. But knights tend to be better earlier in the game than later. So attacking is not a bad idea if you have the knights. Depends on the position and all sorts of things. But so I'm not that eager to simply castle kingside and suffer. So, all right, so queen d7, rook 8 or c1. All right, so white is clearly anticipating a castle's queenside and some sort of, like these bishops are pointing very dangerously towards that area of the board. So, I think white has every reason to be optimistic. So, yeah. Takes. So, knight g4. Okay, this is a move that messes up white a lot. So, white probably needed to have not played rook c1 and probably needed to play bishop f3. The reason is because bishop f3 is a good... This is the a good demonstration of prophylactic chess and prophylactic thinking. In this position, white was... I mean, this is a blitz game, so, when I say these things, it's not like Chess Explained was making some sort of terrible blunder or didn't know what he was doing. But white was probably caught up in his own plans, which were very attractive, which is, rook c1, pointing towards the king that he anticipates castling into. So, that's very exciting. So, he got wrapped up in his own plans. He neglected to notice that black has ideas as well. So, a lot of times it's better to screw up your opponent's plans than to advance your own. And this is a good case in point. Because, although I'm a little confused, because bishop f3, why can't this be played? See, the idea with bishop f3 is to prevent knight g4, which is, a fairly important thing, a fairly important aspect of Black's plan is to put the knight on g4 and make this bishop strange. But after this move to try and cover that square, I don't understand why queen h3 is not... Okay, according to the computer, white is now just winning. And I don't know why. Because this looks very scary. And... Oh, maybe here? I guess if white could play... If white could play bishop g4, the queen's trapped. But the queen isn't trapped here, so... Yeah, g4. Huh. Oh, let me turn on move suggestions. Okay. Where are move suggestions? I don't know where move suggestions are. Huh. Shit. Ah, I seem to have lost the game. Huh. This is not the most intuitive thing, but okay. So bishop f3. Well, computer arrows. Maybe it's this. Ah, okay. Sorry, I found it. Okay, so yeah, it says g4, and then what's white? I guess is the queen is just trapped, huh? Is that the problem? If I play, ah. Oh, that's a problem. Yeah, white is winning a piece. Okay, so that's the reason this works. Is because, yeah, that would be a very hard thing to see in blitz. Because this move looks very scary, and it's very strange to play g4. That's not a move you normally play. Although. Again, wait a second. Am I just missing something? Like, alright, what if takes? Because then the queen's immediately threatening something very dangerous. Okay, computer errors again. Alright, so queen e1. Yeah, I can understand white not being that excited about this, but apparently this is very good for white. The H file isn't enough to generate anything real, I guess, which is sad. Yeah, it's hard to add to Black's attack. It's hard to even call Black's attack an attack, to be honest, because there's just not that much to it. And we can't play moves like this because of bishop g4, so actually Black's position is awkward. Alright. And actually the suggestion is just to castle kingside and give up. on, you know, any sort of pretension of any, yeah. Oh well. So, alright, so that's what white should have done. And then white is actually doing very well. Which makes me think that, oh, whoops. Which makes me think that, I'm not sure. I guess I'm overestimating black's position. Although, you know, after bishop h3, it isn't forced to play queen h. But in any case, rook c1 is a pretty big inaccuracy. Because, if you allow black to play knight g4, then suddenly white's position starts to look significantly less imposing. This bishop is, you know, I mean, this bishop's now uncomfortable. So, queen d2. Alright, so an important concept in chess is to not do things until they're timed properly. I mean, timing matters, basically, in chess. If you play knight g4, even if your intention is probably to take this bishop, there's no reason to do so until until you need to. It's a trump that you can always cash in, basically. And when you cash it in matters. Doing so immediately relieves white of a certain amount of pressure. Although it would be a perfectly reasonable thing to do is play knight takes bishop here. But it's often best to wait until you need to play a move like that, even if it's a good one. Delaying good moves is an important part of chess. Yeah, the bishop isn't particularly dangerous at the moment. Someday it might become very dangerous because, you know, if I have to castle queenside or something, this bishop is hitting some sketchy squares. But until that happens, the knight can sit here and has, you know, the better part of the relationship. Basically, in the relationship between this bishop and knight, this knight has all of the power, or something. I don't know. So yeah. In any case, so queen f5 with obvious ideas of, you know. Throng asks, why did I play h5 earlier on instead of before white had castled? Because white will castle kingside in this position. There is there's pretty much absolutely no other choice for white in this position than the castle kingside. The queen side is very much not the place a king wants to go with this bishop here. And the king can't really sit in the center because there's no pawn cover. Whereas black actually has a lot of pawn cover. So my king could actually sit in the center for at least a little bit and not feel too endangered. But white can't. So white pretty much has to go to the king side. Also, it makes a virtue of these clumped pawns, these double pawns, because it's extra pawn cover. So the king's actually pretty safe on the king side compared to anywhere else. So it's pretty much a fait accompli that white will go that direction. So this move is not going to be in vain. Also, another reason to play h5 is that it's not so much just because you might play h4. There's also the possibility you might want to develop this knight askew to h6, in which case it's nice to have the rook backing it up as well, as otherwise issues can occur. So, alright, in any case, back to our ship. Alright, so queen h5, f5, threatening that. Queen d5. This is the mark of a strong player, is he recognizes the dangers, and also he's not in any way afraid to enter an endgame that's maybe at best very slightly better for him. Not that anybody's really afraid to enter an endgame that's better for them, but still, like, it's mature. You know, it isn't like white's just trying to checkmate. You know, there's larger positional concepts going on here. And so again, we have this issue of exchanges and such. It would be very bad. White is threatening queen takes queen, which would be annoying because the pawn structure would be messed up. So, although to be honest, now that I'm looking at it, I'm not sure the pawn structure would be messed up in any really serious way. Oops, sorry. But white's idea is clearly to exchange queens. Um, so the issue is it seems at first the simplest thing to do is, well, he's kind of attacking my queen, so I should just take. But that would be really bad, I think. Although the computer actually seems to think that this move would be fine, so that's kind of amusing. I don't know why the computer seems to think that this is fine. But interestingly enough, the computer seems to... This move's very bad, I thought, because it develops white's pieces. The knight now brings itself here, but computer says this is no problem, simply castle queenside, and black is absolutely fine. There's pressure on this. I think the computer, to be quite honest, is underestimating some of this kind of play, but maybe not because, I don't know, the computer is always right. Also, the possibility of pawn takes seems very dangerous as well, but the computer, again, doesn't seem to care and just plays knight b4. Again, I'm skeptical that the computer really knows what the hell is going on here. But I'm also skeptical that I know what the hell's going on here. After here... For some reason... Yeah, I mean, this looks scary to me. The black's rooks are disconnected. And I'm not sure exactly what's going on. So, alright. The computer also takes back its evaluation as we move along. So, like, I think I'm actually vindicated on that. But the point is that queen takes queen is, I think, clearly anti-positional. It opens up a file for the rook, advances this pawn, or advances this knight. So it's a bad move. So instead we go knight takes, and now we go queen g4. Again, in this position, the queen looks quite silly on d5. It's in the way of all of the pieces that want to use that square. The knight would like to jump to that square. The bishop would like to be pointing this way. The queen is in the way of all this stuff. So the white queen is rather badly placed, and the black queen, I think, is rather obnoxiously placed. So this seems to be, you know, a reasonable way to go. So, all right. So, of course, chess is playing simply tries to, again, trade off queens as best as possible. And so at this point, there doesn't seem to be anything better than to do so. You could retreat the queen, but it's not, like... I mean, you're wasting a tempo, and, you know, I mean, white probably starts making scary moves at some point. So, all right. So takes, and g5. This is a standard sort of move that, you know, this is where a certain amount of experience or just moxie does pay off. Moves like this are sometimes hard to play when you're playing, you know, an international master or something, but you just have to have faith in structure. And I mean, it's not like it's a brilliant move or anything, but it's important to play moves like this and not to be afraid. The point is that pawn takes pawn is, you know, even if white could somehow miraculously save his g-pawn by taking, these pawns are horrible. Now, they're all isolated. They're all going to probably be picked off. There's e5 square is absolutely permanent for the black pieces. So it's hey, hello people. The point is that, like, the positional compensation, and as you play you will learn these things. The positional compensation for a sacrifice such as this is immense. It's funny because the computer says it's absolutely the right thing to do is to take the pawn on g5. But this is, again, computers can play such moves and make them work, but I think this is where people, what would be the term for it? Misunderstand some basic chess principles by following the computer slavishly. If you go over a game like this and the computer says this move is bad, like g5 or something is a bad move because it loses a pawn, it could lead you to conclude that these types of sacrifices are bad to play. And I think that's a complete misreading of how chess works. Because sacrifices like this are definitely not bad to play. They're bad to play against a computer. And even against a computer, I don't think the sacrifice would be bad. In fact, actually, it might be very, very good, because I don't think the computer understands how bad these pawns are. But I think to a human, it's intuitively obvious how bad these pawns are. And how important this square is for the black pieces. So, this is just one of those situations where it's very easy to misunderstand some basic chess strategy by simply looking at a computer evaluation. I mean, yes, if I played this out against the computer would win as white. But I will never, or it's very unlikely that I will ever believe that it's because of G5. What? Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of times where it's okay to create crappy pawns if you have enough compensation for said crappy pawns. But yeah, absolutely, Throng. I mean, every position is different. My point is mainly that the computer will tell you that this move is not actually a good one. Or it won't say that, I mean, or at least it'll say that taking for white is not a blunder, apparently. That seems to be what the computer is saying, is that taking for white is not a blunder. But as far as I can tell, it actually is very much a blunder. Why do I have this weird arrow? Oh well. Well, in any case, you'll notice that Chess Explained did not... Oh, that's that arrow. Okay. Chess Explained had no interest whatsoever in capturing that pawn. And I think he was absolutely right not to have any interest in capturing that pawn. Okay. So this has been a net gain for black, because this king has been exposed. That was the annoying thing about G5. Well, okay, good point. Yeah, I mean, the browser computer's pretty weak. But that was the annoying point of G5, is no matter how I capture, or rather, no matter how white recaptures, he has to make a concession. If he captures with the E-pawn, then the D5 square becomes black's. If he captures with the G-pawn, then white's king becomes exposed, which, as we'll see, becomes an issue. Alright, castle's queenside, rook H1. So, at this point, Chess Explained isn't really trying to put huge pressure on black anymore. He's simply just trying to exchange off pieces and draw. Because black doesn't have any problems anymore. Black is at least equal, and there's nothing really to play for with the rooks, except to put them on the only open file. So, takes. Now, I don't know why he decided to... Oh, yeah, he didn't want to take this way, because, again, structure. Something like this, and now it really does look like white is suffering. Although you could say that white has better chances here than at first you might expect, even though the black knight is inevitably going to wind up on a square like c5 and cause white all sorts of difficulties. Because at least white has something. White has an active rook. So this might not have been such a bad way to play. Yeah, I don't think white is doing badly here. This is probably just still totally equal. It looks a little gross. And again, Chess Explained is a very rational, positional style player. He's not interested in fancy shit. And I think that it probably just disturbed him, to have to even put up with the idea of recapturing with the b-pawn if bishop takes knight. So he didn't allow that, and he said he played king takes. And now came an amusing sequence that finished the game. I found this to be odd, because... Alright, okay, well, first let's show what happened, and then I'll explain why I found it odd. I played rook g8, and he just pre-moved king g2. I think he actually thought I had played here, and that the king was in check, and so he played king g2 in response. Clearly he was anticipating rook h8. If he looked at the position for more than a nanosecond, of course, he would not have played king g2, as it loses the game instantly to the discovered check, which I played, and then he resigned. So, okay. The point is this, though. Why was he anticipating rook h8 check? The reason he anticipated rook h8 check, in my opinion, is very simple. It's because he was playing a lot of crappy players earlier. Sorry. I should phrase that more diplomatically.
Unbelievable.
Thank you for the follow, Will Wolf 67. But he was playing a lot of low-rated players earlier in his stream. And I think he had gotten in the habit of expecting his opponent to play the most obvious move. You know, a check or something obviously attacking. You know, something crude. And he's a positional player that sees, you know...
Unbelievable.
Thank you for the follow, King Tomato the First. He's a positional player that, you know, has other thoughts than simply what can I attack. Alright. So he was anticipating a really bad move. And that's what I find amusing about this, is he thought I was being sneaky. But the fact is I wasn't being sneaky at all. I was just playing a move that was not bad. Rook h8 would be a terrible move. Well, not terrible, but it wouldn't be a very good move.
Unbelievable.
Thank you for the follow, Los Gredos. Or Guidos. Los Guidos. I mean, okay, I'm being a bit harsh, but this rook check is kind of the kind of move that like a 1600 player plays instantly. It looks good. It's like put a rook on an open file with check. Like, how can that be bad? Well, it can be bad because you're actually just forcing your opponent's king towards the center of the board. And that's bad. It actually is very bad because when you play rook g8, you basically are cutting off the white king from participating in the game. Because you have... It's kind of like controlling the 7th rank, but laterally.
Unbelievable.
Thank you for the follow, Throng23. And that's very important that you keep the king out in endgames. I mean, that I think it's just, you know, something everybody can understand. So the point is that this move is totally natural and normal. I mean, and if white plays this move to try and make a pin, it doesn't work at all. Black will simply check out of the pin, and then we get this move, and then we have... And now this is actually very seriously dangerous for black, because after we exchange off rooks, this pure minor piece endgame is very much in black's favor because of the horrible weaknesses. So it's very important that white maintain rooks in a position like this, because it's extremely hard to create any counterplay in a position like this, and this position will become very, very bad very quickly. White is already forced to babysit this pawn. The king comes up the board. Actually, this is just dead winning, because there's no way for white to protect this pawn in time. And black just wins. So this would have been an absolute disaster. So therefore, this rook is pretty obnoxious. So yeah, Owen has an idea, which is simply white could play here. But we're spending a lot of tempi to get the king back in the game. And also in that time, say I make a move like, I don't know, say I move here. Then, you know, I mean, issues can arise, although I guess this is okay because of that. So, alright. But, yeah. It's just awkward for white to deal with this rook.
Unbelievable.
Thank you for the follow, Will Wolf 67. Alright, so my point is this. This move is perfectly natural. And the only reason that it caught him by surprise was simply the fact he had been playing so many bad players. Again, bad players is a little too pejorative, but, you know, weaker players or just, you know, low-rated players earlier. Yeah, 50 seconds is easily... Birnoko, 50 seconds is incredibly easily enough time to win after... Okay, in this position, there's nobody in the world... I mean, I'm not a particularly good chess player, but there's probably nobody in the world that I'm not going to beat with 50 seconds and this position. I mean, I know that sounds hubristic, and it doesn't mean that I'm particularly good. It just means that this being up a piece in this simple a position, I should be able to win. I mean, okay, if I'm playing Magnus Carlsen, somehow he'll weave some sort of magic. But no, I should be able to beat practically anybody as black at this point. A piece up in a simple endgame, it shouldn't be that hard. Although, come to think of it, that's, yeah. I could be very wrong. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, actually, I bet there are players that could somehow manage to stall the game out past 50 seconds for me. I can see a player somehow managing. Extraordinarily strong players have ways of creating difficulties in even the most ridiculously bad positions. So, I take it back. But no, I think it's perfectly reasonable to resign as white, even if I had 30 seconds. 50 seconds is a lot, I think, for a position this simple. So, yeah. So, yeah, that was that game. It really, it was just a silly blunder. And the reason, again, that Chess Explained made that blunder, in my opinion, was simply because he was playing low-rated players earlier on and got into the habit of anticipating crappy moves. And so, yeah. Because, this is not a shocking move. Rook G8, it's like the most obvious move in the position. On a certain level. But, okay. Alright. Hopefully, I'm going to just recap this a tiny bit before we move on to games. The things to take from this, in my opinion, are the importance of the white e-pawn, holding it back in a lot of lines. When it gets diverted, as in this line, the significance of white's d4 square and how weak it can become. The power of prophylaxis that white could have employed by playing bishop f3 here, preventing black from his only real attacking idea of knight g4. The power of prophylaxis, very important. When your opponent only has one way to improve his position, and you have many ways to improve your position, you should take that moment to prevent your opponent from improving his position that one way. Because I can't stop white from improving his position in a million ways. White's going to, no matter what I do, if I don't have anything that I can do, white's going to play a3, b4, rook c1, and roll me on the queen side with his bishops. So, basically, I can't stop that very easily. Those moves are almost impossible to stop. Whereas my idea of knight g4 is actually trivially easy to stop. Just bishop f3. So, that's an important concept. Prophylaxis is sometimes extremely valuable. And then, the only other concept really important is really the idea of pawn structure. The importance of pawn structure. And moves like this. These little moves can be very, very useful. The seeds of black's victory in this game, other than Chess Explained simply blundering, were sort of sown by, I believe, g5. And that's an important... Oh, thank you for following, A-Gambit. I think that's an important point. That is easily missed. When you go over a game like this, you see the blunder. You see this blunder, and you say, oh, that's the game. But this blunder was brought about by exposing the white king. And exposing the white king was brought about by the g5 move, and the understanding that this is not a pawn sacrifice. Because a lot of times, I think players who are like 1600, when I was 1600, I'm not sure I would consider a move like g5. It just wouldn't be on my radar. And as you gain experience, these moves start to occur more and more often. Thank you for the follow, No Pawns. So I think these little moves, like g5, are the key to a lot of wins, because they cause positions where your opponent is going to blunder more often. And, the computer won't tell you this type of stuff. The computer's not going to say this move is what won you the game. You know, it won't even say that this move is good. It might even say this move is bad. But it's the importance of seeing it in a position like this, that these are the type of things that separate, you know, the ability to beat good chess players. I mean, that allow the ability to beat good chess players, is because you have to be able to find ways to create problems for your opponent, and sometimes those ways look weird at first sight. So, I mean, you know, the computer doesn't appreciate this move. It just thinks it's yet another move it's okay. But it's an important point in the game, and it's an important lever towards creating difficulties. Because the reason that the computer won't tell you these things is because the computer doesn't understand that the idea of difficulty. Or the computer only understands difficulty in a very crude sense. The computer doesn't understand that a move like this is uncomfortable, because the computer doesn't mind an uncomfortable position as long as it isn't actually bad. So the computer won't tell you when you make a move that causes problems for your opponent. Because the computer doesn't understand, again, the computer doesn't understand the concept of problems. You know, either something is or it isn't. You know, so these are things that, yeah, if you're just looking at a computer evaluation to tell you how to play chess, these are the types of things that you will miss. And it's why I think it's limited use to rely on the computer for instruction or to explain what's actually happening in a chess game. This point in the game is an important point. It's a turning point in the game, and the computer ignores it completely. And also, G3 is a turning point in the game, positionally. And the computer doesn't point that out. And so forth and so on. No, I think Grandmaster games are much better places to look for ideas than mine. Alright, okay. In any case, Chess Explained, I mean, you know, Chess Explained was not trying to be hyper-instructive when he played the game against me. And he was just relaxing and just playing natural moves. So I watched the video, and he doesn't say an awful lot. But that's fine. It's very hard to say things while you're playing. And there was no pretense of trying to be instructive in his stream at that, you know, I mean, or ironically for his name. But he wasn't presuming to try and be instructive when he was playing. He was just playing and, you know, saying a few things as they occurred. So it was a limited amount of things that he said. But there were some things that were instructive. And I think I want to point out one thing, though, before we move on with this game, which is that Chess Explained was absolutely right. His feel for this position was actually better than mine. Because he wasn't concerned about really any of this stuff. He made a prophylactic move with blitzes, and had he noticed bishop f3, all of my silly aggression would have come to naught. Which was really his point. Was that, okay, rook c1 was bad, but had he played bishop f3, his rather sanguine outlook upon white's position, in spite of the open h-file, would have been completely justified. And I think that's an important point. It's a mark of a stronger player, is that they're not afraid of your nonsense. If I had to, you know, sum up what makes a strong player, what makes one player stronger than another, that's how I'd sum it up. Is the stronger player is not afraid of the weaker player's nonsense. And the weaker player is very afraid of the stronger player's nonsense. So, yeah. That's basically my summation of strength in chess. And there. So, alright, we're now looking at games. Nuck Strike has messaged me a game. Yeah, bishop f3 would have been a very hard move to see in blitz. Bishop f3 would be a very hard move to play in blitz, because you have to see a very funky and dangerous looking sequence of takes, queen, and even here, you know, I mean, it just looks scary to be attacked like this. So, I mean, although this isn't really that big an attack, but still. It's something. Or, actually, to be honest, the scarier one was this. And then you have to see this weird-looking move. But, okay, alright. Let's start looking at your guys' games, because this game is not that interesting. I had to kind of mine it for a lot to get something out of it. So this game is Nuckstrike's game. I don't know which side he is, but that might not be relevant. Nuckstrike, if you tell me what side you are, I can refer to you by that. Alright, so this is Felix NL versus J Tate. And, let's see. So we start with the orangutan. Nuckstrike was white, and he lost the game. Alright. So, B4. B4 is one of those moves that it's not nearly as bad as it looks. It's just basically a, extended kind of Queen's Indian. I mean, I don't know what you'd call it. It's just, it is what it is. Alright. So, these moves are fairly self-explanatory. Sometimes black will take. And then bishop takes. And then, I love chess for reasons like this. Because you already have a weird imbalance that people could argue endlessly about which side benefits from an exchange like this. On one hand, you have black saying, I've just increased my development massively. Because I'm going to play knight f6, and I'm going to play knight c6, kicking the bishop. So, after something like this, black is up a massive amount of development. He has all of his pieces out, and he's castled. And white is nowhere close to castling, and only has 2 pieces out. So, on the development score, white... excuse me. I'm coughing like mad. Yuck. On the development score, black is doing great. You know, on the Morphe scale of existence, black can claim an advantage. However, what white can claim is that he has more center pawns, and therefore has a structural advantage. And, you know, we'll play, like, you know, something like e3 or something, and slowly but surely after he castles, try and make use of that. But, okay, my point is this. Chess is complicated, because already you have these issues, these imbalances at play on move 2, if white captures. Sorry, if black captures. You know, so that's interesting to me. And I encourage people to, you know, if I had chess students, I would tell them to explore these imbalances. Because that's where you're going to find you can sometimes make progress. So, you know, if I was if I was black against this, I would take the pawn on b4. And I would try and play my imbalances against white's imbalances. And see how they go. But usually black does not take the pawn on b4, and usually defends his own e5 pawn, considering this pawn more valuable than this one. Which is, I think, you know, not the entire story. But okay, moving on. d6. Alright, so these are moves that don't really require a lot of explanation. Basically, both sides are getting their pieces out. Alright, d4 makes a lot of sense. Pressure. Alright, so we see this type of thing happen a lot in the in these openings, is that black gets this pawn on e4, and it sort of turns into a reverse French. Well, it turns into a reverse French if black plays d5 and tries to... You know, it turns into a French exchange variation. Or not exchange variation. Sorry. It turns into a French. But black is not obligated to play d5. And so that makes it actually closer to a closed French, I guess. Like, I mean, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, like, say you had in the French defense something like this. Actually, it's bad because white should have probably maybe that's a bad example. But you know, I mean, this sort of structure. If you have something like this, where the pawn isn't on d4, so it can't be kicked around by c5, and you have this e5 pawn, you know, point. All right, so like this is a typical kind of opening against the French. Notice how this is sort of reversed version of it here. So, okay. So white is playing the black side of a French defense, basically. Which, you know, makes a lot of sense. He's a tempo up, and he's gotten the free b4 move in. So, you know, there's something to be said for playing this way as white. You do have to worry about black making use of this pawn in some scary way. Basically, what happens a lot of times in these openings is white blithely castles kingside and then just gets whomped by some attack. Spearheaded by this pawn. But, okay. So, c6. Alright, g3 looks bad. Let me just say right now. The computer doesn't say anything about this move, although the evaluation drops from plus 0.5 to suddenly 0. But g3 looks bad. Because you've just made a huge wonkin' hole on f3. Yeah, also you're asking for this to happen now, and this bishop, if it comes to a square like this, the light squares can suddenly, yeah, wow, yeah. g3 is not a move you normally want to make with your pawn on e3. It wastes tempo to weaken your position and put your bishop on a bad square. So, like, I mean, not a bad square, but like a... It's not so much you're putting your bishop on a bad square. It's just that it's... Ugh, these squares are now weak. f3 makes sense in a position like this. Yeah, I mean, the idea would be to try and undermine black's strong point. I don't think it works here, because I think black would simply... I think black could simply make a move like this. Or maybe just here. Or hell, actually, to be honest, like, why not just take? Because the problem is that white is in no position to enforce e4, and he's in no position to take back this way. Because, there's probably horrible things that can happen here. Like, you know, something like this. And yeah, I mean, white's king is not safe enough to be messing around with things, with pawn pushes like that. Yeah, I mean, once white is castled, yes, playing f3 becomes totally rational. For example, say white just goes about his business. Say everybody goes about their business. And say I don't know, we just bring a knight here. This is a bad move, but alright. Now f3 you could play. And, you know, if takes, you could even take back this way. Although, I mean, it's kind of a stupid way to take back. Probably better to take back this way. But, I mean to take back this way. But, you know, you could play this way and hope that this pawn isn't a hyper-weak thing. But, you know, I mean, there's trade-offs. There's always trade-offs. Alright. In any case, in the game we had g3. This is bad. Don't weaken your squares this way. So d5, fine. You know, I'd be so excited as black here. I'd just play h5 immediately and just, you know. But okay. d5, knight at c3. Okay. You know, given a million years, white has time to play bishop, you know, queen b3, b5, and stuff. But a million years is not what white actually has. So, all right, castle's kingside. Ugh. I feel like castle's kingside's wrong. Again, the computer doesn't say it is, so, you know, I guess I'm wrong. But, you know, I just want to hack the h-pawn and put the bishop here. But, okay, all right, I get overexcited. So, castles is probably good. All right, bishop g2, bishop b4, voila le problème. Because, yeah, you can't really play f3 if the king's still stuck in the center. Things open up too fast and too awkwardly. So white's forced to play queen b3, which he wants to do anyhow, but look at this square is scary. All right, so how does black exploit, you know, this weakness? All right, so rook here, that's a good start. It makes it even harder to play f3. So, all right. So castles. All right, a6. You know, I was expecting like queen here and bishop here or something, but okay. A6. All right, that's probably the wrong rook. I don't know why you'd use this rook, because this rook's got nowhere to go. If you play h5, you just keep your king where it is. But okay, fine. This is probably better for black to play it this way. You know, and I'm exaggerating the problem here a little bit. I mean, g3. Again, the computer isn't saying that it's losing, and to be honest, white's position is not that bad here. On the other hand, I think black didn't play it very incisively, but fine. Like, the computer's not saying anybody blundered or anything. White just, it looks scary to have this pawn here and to be facing this type of stuff. But it's not that bad. It's just, I don't like rook e1 because, like, this rook, I mean, this poor rook doesn't have anywhere to go. I mean, why not use the other rook? But okay, fine. All right, so bishop e6. Now I feel like both sides have no idea what they're trying to do long term because this is just a blitz game. Oh, it isn't. It's a classical rated game. So 45-45. Okay, fine. But still, I kind of feel like both sides are a little bit unsure what they're doing. Because why would you play bishop g4 to chase the queen to b3, and then once the queen is on b3, then retreat your bishop to e6 to deal with the queen on b3? But okay, all right. It does solidify the structure. On the other hand, now why is this rook here? Because you're blocked on your own file. I mean, you know, okay. So there's a certain amount of incoherency, or just sort of lack of focus amongst the strategy here, such that there is. I don't know what to suggest instead, though. Like, probably rook e8 might not be. I mean, I don't know. I keep wanting to play h5 and just throw a pawn somewhere. But short of that, I don't know. Maybe queen d2 and exchange off light squared bishops and then really try and go to town on this stuff. Which isn't always so easy to do. But maybe there's ways. Bear in mind that if white actually makes good on some threat to actually win stuff on d5, like, that might come at the cost of opening lines that helps black even more in the upcoming attack. So, like, you know, it's complicated. It's complicated. All right, A case. Moving on. Takes. All right, so white, for some reason, releases tension with takes. That's not a good idea. Be much better to increase tension with a move like c5, and then play like knight a4 or something, or a4 and b5 or something. You know, I guess this isn't really increasing tension. Thank you for follow, Jay-Z. But c takes d5 is sort of doing black a favor a bit. Although, you know, I could be wrong. I mean, probably white wants to get a knight on c5 and use this open file in some sort of productive way. So maybe, okay, let's see if that can happen. Or yeah, you could just leave the pawn on c4 too. Alright, so now we're getting some weird mixed messages from white as to what he wants to do. First he, you know, unnecessarily clarifies things on this side of the board, instead of just opening files like a good queen-pawn player or trooper should. You know, I mean, remember your first move, white. Like, your first move was b4, so, like, you definitely, you know, that's sounding some sort of intent to do something progressive on the queen side. But, okay, alright. So, this move, not sure why. I guess maybe he was concerned about, Probably concerned about pawn takes pawn. Yeah, that was probably the concern. Is that, I mean, say you make a move like here, then pawn takes pawn here, and then this. And then you have every reason to feel like you've done something wrong. So, that was probably White's concern. And hence, pawn takes pawn. And you know what? Maybe that's... Why am I being so critical? It's possible that pawn takes pawn is the right move here. Because if you play c5, you're denying the ability for your knight to go to that square. So, you could argue that c5 is not in White's interest. I mean, yes, you could maybe put the knight on b4, but the knight on b4 doesn't really accomplish anything. Also, this knight on d7 will prevent that anyhow. But even if you... Okay, for example, knight d7, knight b4. Say black gets cheeky and actually just plays here. With the idea of pushing these pawns forward and bringing a knight here. This knight looks good, but it's actually pretty meaningless. Like, I mean, what are you going to do with that knight on b6? It's not... I mean, this is a great example of a square that looks great but has no meaning. So, maybe White very sensibly was not, you know... Maybe White was, you know, very sensibly not enamored with that line, or that general... Not so much line specifically, but that general way of playing, of trying to make progress on the queen side. So instead he takes, and now says, okay, now I can put the knight here and maybe put it on c5. And on c5, the knight is much more meaningful. It can maybe take a bishop, it could take a pawn, it could... You know, a knight on c5 is something. So, and also I can still play, you know, so like this is what... I am sorry that I criticized this. No. Because the more I look at it, the more it makes sense. No, Nuck Strike. I think your move was made perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Okay, so now f3 though has nothing to do with any of this. Yeah, I mean the problem is that White is changing his plan all the time. Why is there a rook on e1? I mean, if your idea was to play on the queen side, use the f rook and use your a rook on the c file. So rook c1 had no... Yeah, I mean there's a certain incoherence of plan here. I mean, this is the wrong rook to use if you're going to make moves on the queen side, which is what you should be doing. So, all right. So here, I mean, a natural move would be something like a4, knight a4, trying to come into c5. And if black tries to keep him out with a move like this, then we could make a move like this. And the idea is that we're putting some pressure. Maybe we'll play b5 someday. In the meantime, we could double rooks on the c file. If he ever contests, if he develops his knight, then we could maybe even play a move like this. And this is often quite annoying. Because suddenly black is under a bit of pressure. If here... We get our other rook in. And this could become obnoxious. This could become obnoxious very quickly. If we try and, you know, if something like this, then we could even play here now. And now there's an awful lot of pressure on this weak square. Why is there a cat wearing a box? Not sure. Alright, so, you know, I mean, that would be maybe a way to play. Yeah, good question. Wait, can I type cat? Wait. Oh, I get it. All right. Okay, in any case, so f3 looks a little odd, but I mean, on the other hand, it's a move that makes a certain amount of sense, because otherwise, how are you ever going to use your f rook? So, you know, it's a question of like a little inaccuracy begetting more inaccuracies. The inaccuracy of rook here makes it so that white has to justify his rook on f1, so he has to play f3, even though it's no longer in the spirited position to do so. So, okay. So f3 takes. Yeah, and okay, so this pawn is awkward. But at least this rook has been emancipated. And also, I guess we're putting some pressure on d5, although it looks pretty solid. Okay, so knight c3. Knight a4, the move that we all were hoping to see. So, alright, knight a4, b5. Oh, so this happened in the game. Alright. Rook c1. Yeah, okay, so white's playing exactly the moves that I suggested. He's just doing so in conjunction with f3. Which I think is questionable. But, okay. So, knight e7. Yeah, see, this weakness is so weak. That's why I didn't like f3, is because this pawn is scary. It's like this knight comes to f5. There's all this pressure on this point. It's preventing white from doing, from going about his business peacefully and happily. Yeah, the rule is when you can, usually you take back in a way where when you can create meaningful pressure, you play it. When you can't create meaningful pressure, you'll probably just create meaningful weaknesses. But compare again, if white had just done what we're looking at now, earlier, notice that black doesn't have any easy way to generate play. So, I mean, this is so much less molested. White is so much less molested in this line than in how it actually occurred, because f3 just created weaknesses that he had to tend to. So, okay, so... Alright, here comes that obnoxious knight. Oh, so maybe rook c6 isn't so great. But, okay, I mean, the point is more that... I mean, I think white can go about his business with less difficulty. With less distractions. White can concentrate on the queen side with much less distraction by not playing f3, I think. But, okay. Alright, so now the knight comes back. I think white's losing his nerve at this point. It's like, black already has somehow creeped up to a significant advantage without ever there being an obvious mistake on the part of white. And yeah, so white at this point is like, oh shit, nothing's working. So we're gonna have to bring this knight that's not doing anything back. The prodigal knight, I guess. So knight c3. Queen d, alright. Alright, that g3 move, again, not so happy sometimes. Yeah, no, I mean, black's position is hyper-natural. The queen's investigating all sorts of things. The knight's investigating all sorts of things. The rook's investigating all sorts of things. No, I mean, black's position is just working. Alright, so the knight returns to defend stuff. Yeah, I mean, just once white gets into a mindset of, oh shit, I gotta defend all this shit, things have turned. Like, the tempo, the tide, the worm has altered its trajectory. Because all of these ambitious plans... It's like when, in my area, they thought about building a railroad for a while, and they built a little bit of one, and then they just they stopped building it because they didn't have any more money, and there was no real reason for it at the time, and so they just, I mean, at that point, oh god, it does sound bad, but like, right. Wow. It's hard for me to get that image out of my head now. But okay, so basically, yeah, it's like, I mean, and then the net result of it all is you wind up in a position that feels like Eureka, California, or something. It's like White's position suddenly feels completely dysfunctional and like probably has a really high crime rate and a lot of meth addicts. I mean, that's basically what's happening here, because all of these plans just sort of, like, they had to be unraveled, and then the economy just fucked up, and yeah, so like, yeah. White's position has a very bad economy. It's in a recession. So, alright, so Black can play as he pleases. Just throws the pawns on the, again, because of G3, it's easier to break open things. So, alright. A4. Well, okay, I mean, basically, alright, it was a tortured reference, but basically, there's a local town. The closest major town to where I live is 7 miles away. It's Eureka, California. And it used to be kind of a logging town and stuff, but then it had a really terrible logging company that was really bad to the environment, and there were a lot of protests, and eventually there was lawsuits, and eventually it just went bankrupt and collapsed. But in doing so, it kind of completely screwed up the entire economy of the town, and now the town's just basically meth addicts and kind of a certain amount of, it's just a economically depressed town with sketchy restaurants and people wandering around in the streets, kind of zombie-like. And actually has the highest per capita crime rate, property crime rate in the country, I think. But okay, in any case, the point is that because it had this plan for for how it was supposed to operate as a town, and then it fucked it up. It totally fucked it up because the plan didn't really, it didn't take into account, the fact that the company that was, that they're depending on was run by horrible, terrible people that were screwing up the environment. I don't live in Eureka. Owen, let me be clear about this. I'm not in Eureka. It's 7 miles away. I'm in the town of Arcata, which is a little college town. It's a different town. But okay. The point here is that let's not get overly concerned about. I'm exaggerating these things a bit, but my point is that White's position reminds me of Eureka. It's 7 miles away. It's not. Yeah. I'm sorry, Owen. People can migrate. Alright. But my point is that White's grand plans, because they did not actually come to fruition, have actually caused him trouble. Because he's had to spend all sorts of time moving pieces that had ambitious ideas over on the queen side back over to the king side. Because none of this actually produced any tangible result. And that's very sad. And what I would have suggested is don't do environmental damage to your own position. Basically, the environmental damage in this case, in the case of Eureka, the environmental damage was they had a logging company that was clear-cutting shit and being extremely, basically disrespectful to its citizens and the environment in general, because it was clear-cutting redwoods and shit, and just being cynical bastards. Now, the analogy here is that F3 is environmental damage, because you're basically weakening. Yes, exactly. This is a very deep moralistic tale now. You're causing damage to your own environment with F3. You've made weaknesses everywhere. And for what? For what? Because you're greedy and you think you can win the D pawn. It's like you're ignoring your own environment so that you can, for illusory gains. Right. If E4 could follow, it would be better. But The point is that after white's environmental damage, now he has to tend to, you know, the consequences. And so now all of his grand plans have come a cropper. All right. City Skylines is awesome. So, all right, okay. So, huge pressure. Huge pressure. Yeah, but it wasn't... At what cost, Owen? At what cost? All right. So this is getting increasingly awkward. We're now playing moves like Rook C3 just so we can defend a measly pawn here. So, yeah. This is just... Yeah, it's incredibly awkward now. We're talking like junior high sock hop awkwardness. So, alright, h5, and it's just obvious that black is just running down the board with all of his shit. Yeah, rook c1. Alright. Light squares. Oh, boy. Yeah, I mean, it's just... Oof. Oof. Alright. So basically, yeah, I mean, white is just hanging on by a thread. He still has, you know, illusory hopes of somehow winning the d5 pawn and justifying the horrifying damage to his kingside. Mostly self-inflicted. Alright, b5 for reasons completely unbeknownst to any of us, because, I mean, the rook file just opens as a result. I mean, I'm not sure what b5 was for. Maybe white originally wanted to play knight takes pawn, but realized that it's far, far too late. Also, rook knight e2 will win an exchange, amongst other things. So what else is there to do? Just plays in this miserable, miserable position. Black actually just ignores the move completely. It just goes straight for the jugular here. All right, bishop. Oh, that was the point of b5, was to kick the queen with bishop a3. Okay, so the queen retreats. Knight takes. And actually, interesting enough, white's stubbornness has made this position not as simple as it might have at first appeared. At first I thought black was just checkmating directly in this position. But white has actually created real counterplay. So maybe there's hope for Eureka after all. With just a little initiative. You know, maybe just revitalize the wharf area. You know, provide some, you know, housing for some of the homeless. Maybe... You know, maybe the town can stop being a shithole again. That's sort of... Yeah, because white's doing a good urban renewal plan here. I gotta give credit to white for not giving up. Alright, so knight check, king over, knight takes, bishop takes. Yeah, huge damage, but at least white's still fighting. Bishop d6, excellent move. So you're fighting the good fight here. I mean, black should be winning, and there's no way that white should have allowed all this risk. But, at least you're not giving up. So, ooh, bishop d6, a move of incredible complications, actually. That's an amazing move. I don't quite understand it, to be honest. But apparently the point is that I don't even know what the point is here. I guess if queen takes here, then queen takes. Dear Lord. I guess is a problem for white. Well, white's just losing a piece unless he moves this somewhere that's attacking this bishop. So, okay. Bishop. Well, if nothing else, we can play a move like here, here, here. And black is up a pawn. And probably going to win more. So, this is very interesting. Bishop e6 is a surprisingly cool move under fire, but maybe it was just because there was very little choice. All right, so white instead plays queen e5. And this is again just really complicated, actually. So I'm sorry that I made this. I'm sorry my annotations have made it seem like white was just losing horribly. I mean, I think white was, and black probably was not as accurate as he could have been. But this position is, you know, exceedingly strange. So rook takes, bishop check. All right, and now all hell is broken loose. White has 3 pieces for the queen. Black still has these pawns, though, so black is up material, but it's white who has solved all of his structural problems. So white has really, as far as I'm concerned, white has made great progress, even though the computer seems to say that white is actually losing as badly as white has ever been losing. But, like, I really applaud white's effort to imbalance the game and try and make it non-one-sided. Because although the computer says this is nothing and that black is doing great, this is a great way to play as white if you want to try and put up resistance. So bravo. Okay. So we get this bizarre material imbalance of queen and 2 pawns versus rook and 2 bishops. I honestly don't understand why the computer likes black so much. I would have thought white would be for choice. I mean, he's got 3 pieces versus 1. He has a passed D pawn. Like, wow, I'm really shocked that the computer says that black is better here. I really would have thought that this amount of material would outweigh this, and the pawns be damned. But, you know, as is often the case, the queen cooperates really well with pawns, especially passed pawns. So that probably has something to do with it. Let's see. Okay, so f6. Oh, well, the first problem is that this pawn is not long. Oh, that's a major problem. Yeah, I mean, these are all great things in abstract. It's like, yeah, in theory, like this clump of pieces, and it's fantastic. The problem is that we're losing the D pawn straight off. So that's bad. Suddenly, yeah, I can see what the computer's talking about, because if we lose the D pawn, then we're toast. And I guess there was no way to avoid this really horrible fate. So bishop e4, f6, and yeah, as it turns out, this is unfortunate for white. There's no way that either of you guys probably, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that either of you guys, you know, calculated all of these complications up to this point, and then black was like, oh, but at the end I have f6, and I shall defeat my adversary with the sting at the tail of this combination that I started on move 12. You know, I mean, like, I think black just lucked out with this, having this, because otherwise black squandered his great position. But f6, yeah, f6 makes it so that, yeah, white is in big trouble now. So, all right, so the bishop goes back, queen takes. Yeah, this is getting awkward. It's like the queen's too strong and the pieces are too awkward. So, okay, so bishop, queen check. I got one present. I got a present from a from a friend of mine. She came over and gave me a book, and the book is The Alchemist. So I'm going to read The Alchemist at some point. All right, so Bishop E1. All right, so yeah, this is pawns or it's actually. Oh my God, there's all the pawns are off the board now. Oh. Okay, well this is depressing now. I think Black got a little lucky, to be honest, to be able to just swoop up every single fucking white pawn, just instantaneously. So that, I really think that White was turning the game around, but then this bullshit happened. So oh well. I was not playing at 5 in the morning. I don't think. All right, so White struggles to try and contain the peasant uprising with his officers. Oh, MC. Yeah, the queen's supported by past pawns, especially two of them. You need a lot more than maybe even this armada, veritable armada of white pieces is not really enough. But still, like, even this position, as bad as it is now with the, the pawns and everything, I still feel a twinge of optimism for White, based on just creating mating threats and just, using these pieces to attack the king. So let's see if White manages to do that in any way. Okay, he tries. This is Rook F3 probably isn't a great way to do it. Because the king could just sidestep, but, like, okay. Rook F3. Alright, King F7, check. King F8. Okay, so White is trying. White's trying to, attack. Maybe his methods are a little too crude. But, okay. C3. So, for some reason, White declines to take the pawn on F6. I don't know why. Instead playing there. I don't understand Bishop G6 at all. At least try and... Yeah, I mean, should at least take the pawn and keep checking for as long as you can. But, alright, so Bishop G3. Queen C6. This is very unfortunate. Now the pawn is cover for the king, and these pawns are basically going through. Alright. More moves. More moves. Moves. Note the little tactical point of rook takes here, fails to something. Wait, what does it fail to, actually? What? Okay, we can't take this rook because what? It somehow, like... I don't understand why we can't take on b4. Alright, to the computer arrows. Oh. Yeah, this does it. Okay, so you first make this check, force the king here, and then you make this check. Yeah, okay, alright. Alright. So, yeah, okay. So, okay. Anyhow, White didn't take. Plays here. The groveling continues. Now, I mean... Gee, I don't know, Fianchetto. Just take my title away, alright? Okay, so basically, if I'm playing White here, I don't see why I wouldn't maybe just try and create a draw with a move like this. I mean, like, isn't this just a draw? I mean, for all of my negativity towards, you know, White's position because he has no pawns, and there are all these queens and stuff, but, like, if you just play this, how does... I'm not sure how Black wins. This looks like possibly a drawn endgame. Unless I'm just completely wrong. Okay, so the computer says here, then here. No, White's not getting forked here. Just seems like White could construct a something. I mean, all White has to do is create some sort of fortress. I mean, somewhere where the rook and bishop defend a square that the pawn is going on, and then you just have a fortress at that point. Like this. Like, how do you propose to win this? I mean, yes, the computer says Black is winning because a queen and pawn are 2 pawns more than a rook and bishop. But how do you actually propose to win this position? Oh, wait. I have to go that way. I mean, I don't see how Black makes any progress here. Yeah, you could bring your king in, so what? Oh, wait. I guess if you bring your king in far enough, then you just sack for the bishop. But you just play a discover check. I mean, it's not so simple. Okay, so you can create tempos in this way, where like White is forced to make awkward moves that undermine his control of f3. Well, I mean, a table base will tell us, you know, whether or not this is actually winnable. Yeah, okay. I mean, I can understand not wanting to defend this. But I'm just throwing it out there that this might actually be a draw. I'm not sure. I mean, that sacrificing might be a way to draw here. And I'd like to point out that had you won the f6 pawn, then this would be a trivial draw. So you should have won the f pawn. Okay. Yeah, I think actually White was fine. I mean, I don't think that... I mean, for all my gloom and doom, you know, I mean, this whole... Alright, we get it with the arrows. Oops. Ah, no. For all my gloom and doom about, you know, all of this, I think that the pieces probably prevent White from really being in serious chance. I mean, I think the pieces should save White from a loss here. But, okay, instead what happened was, okay. Yeah, in this position right here, instead of sacrificing for the pawn, White instead played check, and then King E4, which led to the loss of a piece. Oh. So we got this. Actually, I'm so sorry. We got this sort of position I was suggesting. It's just now with the dark squared bishop instead of a light squared bishop. So it amounted to the same thing. The way the game went is a lot like what we just looked at. All right, so white has to try and, play goalkeeper for the f-pawn. All right, already we have problems. All right. All right, so white is trying to keep his position, but, unfortunately after king f2, yeah, now he's just totally lost. So, the problem is that white has to defend very accurately. After king h2, he just loses this bishop. Yeah, oh, and that's what I thought. It's actually pretty dicey stuff. But king h2 throws the game away completely. You have to at all costs just keep, a very difficult endgame to hold. Yeah, okay, so white just commits chess suicide. All right, and the game's over. So I'm very interested in whether or not, in spite of the computer evaluation of, black is up, X whatever amounts of stuff, this endgame to me is interesting. And it would be interesting to put this into a table base. So if anybody has a table base and wants to put, say, I would put this position in, or maybe this position right here, starting right here. And because I'm curious, my suspicion is that white may be able to draw this. Oh, or it's a win for black in 42 moves. Okay. So it's actually losing for white even under perfect play, which of course no human would ever be able to do. So yeah, that's pretty difficult. But I have to say, I mean, I didn't expect Felix basically Nuckstrike. I didn't expect that you were going to make this game interesting after black started to attack. Around this point in the game, I felt like I knew what was going to happen, and that basically white was just going to get stomped. And you managed to actually somehow survive into a really funky endgame, a very unusual endgame. So I'm actually bravo in somehow surviving this. I think black botched some chances to win this more directly, but I really well fought. So 1-3. Okay. It's a really well fought game, in spite of the, again, the environmental damage that white did to his own position with first with G3 and then with F3. So yeah, that was that game. Give me 1 second before I look at the next game. Unfortunately, you guys have sent me games, but the chat has scrolled it to the point where I don't know where the games are anymore. I should put them in Notepad or something, so that I can. So I'm gonna have to go in reverse order, which is I apologize because there are people who sent me games earlier on, and I've lost. I didn't. Yeah. All right. Ah! What the hell happened there? What? What the hell happened with that game? Jesus. That game somehow blew up my computer. I mean, how bad a game could that have been? Wait, 1 second. Where are the cookies? Wait 1 second. I'm looking for my. Nah, I had these cookies I was going to eat. Oh, there. All right, I'm back. So okay, now the chat's complete. So okay, here's how it's gonna work. For any other games to look at. Sorry, I'm trying to open these cookies and failing. There, I did it. Okay, where am I gonna put this? Right here. All right. All right. Um, 1 second. I'm closing things that. Alright. I close things. Actually, later today, I'm going to upgrade my computer. And I'm going to put more memory in it. I bought some memory. And basically, yeah. This afternoon, I'm upgrading my computer. So this might be the last time that you hear from me. Because it's very possible I'll crash my computer horribly. I'm trying to install a solid-state drive into an old computer. I have a feeling it's not going to go well. Alright, so this is a Real Lives game. Okay. Whoa. What the heck? Wow. Look at all the material. Wow. Sorry, I'm munching on something at the moment. I will talk in like a minute. Right now I'm just looking at it. Oh, cookie. Wow. What a position. So this is our good friend, the King's Indian Defense. Everybody loves the King's Indian Defense. The samest variation of the King's Indian Defense tends to be a particularly wonky line. Alright. So C5. Yeah, I mean, We're making no bones about what we're trying to do here. Alright. So, yeah, I mean, the same is just like some white trying to play a Yugoslav attack against the King's Indian. It's a ballsy idea. It's a ballsy idea. Especially because, remember, the big difference, and I talked about this earlier about e4 versus c4, but the big difference when white plays a Yugoslav attack in the King's Indian is that you have a pawn on c4, not a bishop. If you had a bishop on c4, okay, that's one thing. But you got a pawn there. That means castle queenside is suddenly seriously iffier. And d4 is seriously softer. And your king is seriously weirder. So, you know, on the other hand, the center is seriously solider. So, like, it gets complicated, but it tends to be sharper. So black should hack it away. Yeah, go full Benko. Always go full Benko. And king b1. And now we get this beautiful thing where, okay, it's the typical little knight trick that we all, the Zvishin-Yolo of, you know, one of the hoariest Zvishin-Yolos in all of chess is, you know, you play knight b5. By the way, b4 is better according to computer, but okay. Play knight b5, and the point is that after queen takes queen, there's this Zvishin-Yolo of check, and then you take, and you say, nyok, 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 nyok. So, but black has a Zvishin YOLO to, you know, a counter Zvishin YOLO, basically. Right. Eating another cookie. And this is a hyper Zvishin YOLO. There's actually 3 different Zvishin YOLOs. This is all. So this knight is basically performed like basically a minor knight tour of the game while white is one and queen. But when you count up material, alright, black has 2 pieces, but also an extra pawn. And this is a really big ass initiative. Because of all the activity. Yeah. I mean, to my often overly opportunistic eyes, this is, black has real compensation for the queen. Very real compensation. Like, I'd rather play the black side of this. And now, yeah, who knows how this game would go from here. Yeah, but that's a very interesting line. It's not really a game, though, so let's move on. If anybody else has a game they want me to look at, I will look at it. Otherwise, I will upgrade my computer. Yeah, if this was Hearthstone, you know, I mean, like, you would say that the black bishops, you know, have, you know, black is getting value out of his bishop cards. Getting a lot of value. And white is better in, like, the fatigue battle. Yeah, but black is definitely aggro. I use Windows. Before we look at Owen's game, which I'm going to set up right now. Before we look at Owen's game, let me talk about God damn it. Oh, refresh. Wait. How do I refresh this page? F5. Oh. This is sad. Alright, I'm eating one more cookie, and then I'm going to tend to this problem. I mean, the thing is that, I mean, when you think about it, a queen shouldn't be better than two pieces. Because two pieces could always gang up on something and win that thing that the queen can only defend once. And also, it's two pieces. It's twice as many pieces. So, I mean, a queen has to be really powerful to be able to be better than two minor pieces. And yet a queen is much powerful than two minor pieces according to normal chess theory. So it's kind of strange, actually. I'm more surprised that the queen is as strong as it is. But yeah, I mean, yeah. What can I say? All right, I gotta close things because memory is apparently a thing. Yeah, I mean, a queen could fork better, but, like, I mean, two pieces is two pieces. It's... Alright. Let me get rid of Skype for a second. I mean, I think the reason that a queen is so much stronger than two pieces is not just that it can fork, it's because it moves... You can only make one move at a time. If you could move the two bishops at the same time, then the two bishops would always be better than the queen. But you can't move two pieces at once. You can only move one piece at once. So consolidating the power of two bishops into a queen makes the queen very strong. Because it's much more efficient to take advantage of its powers. That's about what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually upgrade my computer and put more RAM on my computer. I bought more RAM. Or downloaded it. Hang on, I'm trying to close Skype. Alright, I closed Skype. Alright, so let me try again. I had problem. We've all downloaded more RAM. It's the way you do it these days. You can download RAM. Yeah. I think that's the major reason the queens are so much stronger than, like, two pieces, is because you can move it. It moves as one thing. Per help? Okay. Owen, let me try again your game. I'm having trouble. My browser's running out of memory and shit. So, can I try again? Come on, silly Ollie. It's the year 2015. Almost the year 2016. This isn't your grandpa's RAM. So I need that game link again because my browser crashed. Nah, silly Ali. Don't be silly. Don't be silly, silly. It's okay, silly. I'm downloading from a trusted site. So I'm gonna, yeah, the RAM that I downloaded will, I think, I'm pretty sure it's good. I'm pretty sure it's good. All right, so Owen, you got to give me that game again because my browser crashed. And then I'm gonna look at Owen's game, and then I'm gonna install. I'm gonna download the RAM and upgrade my computer. All right, here's Music Dan's game. All right, so Music Dan is black, and he's playing. I like to look at these from the white perspective because I'm used to in books looking at it from that perspective. So Music Dan is playing black, just playing good old solid moves. You know, make the pawn brittle, the brittle granite wall that the bishop faces here. And white is playing a King's Indian attack where you put all your pieces on these squares and then just wait for things to occur. Delaying e4 for a long time for some reason. And Music Dan's going for the whole thingamajig. Alright. White sidesteps it. Alright, so yeah, white has a fine position. I don't know what this bishop is really doing on h3. I don't know how black really goes. It's just a position. Like, you know, like, no side is doing fantastically. It's just things are. Things exist. Alright, knight h5 is an unusual looking move in a position like this. It doesn't look right to me, but okay. E5, yeah, the reason that doesn't look right is because this knight suddenly has no squares to go to. But okay. But Music Dan's not concerned. He has provoked the white pawns forward, and now white tries this weird attack. I don't know why the knight has gone to g5. We'll find out. Oh, it was to hit the bishop, right. F4. All right, now we break with this f5 move, f6 move. Now, silly, you download RAM all the time these days. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. All right, so f6. We were wondering about f6 breaks because they've been happening in a lot of games that I've been looking at. It was posted earlier to download moreram.com. Alright, so f6, and here's a good example of f6 being a perfectly cromulent thing to do. You see black doing it a lot in perky positions, and this is very perky. Alright, back goes the knight. Now, oh my god. This has worked out fantastically well for black, of course, because he's gained open files and everything. Of course, white had to just move his knight back. But once he does this, all of a sudden, the awkwardness of all of his misplaced pieces suddenly manifests itself. And now he's just horribly losing. And, oh, the bishop comes back. What? Why did white play that? What was the threat here that... Oh, because white was threatened with queen here. Oh my god. Well, that's sort of pretty. Yeah. Let this be a lesson to you, as if you're playing chess. Don't let this happen. After here, the threat of queen e3 mate is so dire that, yeah. Basically, what we learned from this is that you can have a space advantage. It's like you could pick your nose, you could pick your friends, but you can't pick your friend's nose. It's like that in this position. You can have a space advantage, and you can have decent development, but apparently if you have space advantage and you don't have decent development, you shouldn't take like this. Because your development will be exposed as being not decent. And then you will lose. Yeah, like that's crazy. You can't download a car. All right. All right. Owen's game. And then this is the excuse me. Oh. I never troll, silly. Okay, so basically this is the last game that I'll look at, and then I have to try and upgrade my computer. Wish me luck on that, really. Please wish me, or just, yeah, I'm really scared. I actually will have to download Windows. In fact, I might stream some of the process, the upgrading process, but it's going to be a complicated procedure. And I'm a little bit frightened by it. Anyhow, what am I doing? I'm looking at Owen's game, and then we're gonna go do that. I hope, by the way, in spite of my, I tend to digress, and it's hard to keep on topic, but I hope that somebody somewhere appreciates my efforts to try and be instructive in chess on these streams, because honestly, I know, like, I'm ludicrously unpopular. There's, like, King's Crusher and Blitz stream or whatever, and they're just playing bullet chess, and, like, nothing interesting is really happening, but they're very popular. I hope that, like, somewhere, someone out there, like, benefits in some way from these attempts, because I feel like this is, like, what streamers should do, except with less, with more RAM, and, less digression, and possibly without a cold, and coughing, and, you know, various things. But, okay. Alright, so, Owen is, the black side of this game. Yeah, but they're not interactive. So, okay. In any case, at least I'm making an effort. Instead of the cynical, I sit there on my ass playing 30-second chess and expect people to find that entertaining. But okay, alright, so... Alright, so Owen's playing a King's Indian. And, let's see how it goes. So White plays the classical King's Indian. Knight f3 signifies... Whoops. There it is. Knight f3 signifies the classical King's Indian. This is the classical way of playing it, where White doesn't try any fancy mumbo-jumbo. Fancy mumbo-jumbo would be like f4... or bishop e3, or bishop d3, or f3. Those would be fancy mumbo-jumbo moves. So, alright. At knight f3, it's just saying straight up, I'm just going to play normal moves. I'm not a hyper-pretentious chess player just trying to checkmate you in 2 moves. I'm just going to move my knight, I'm going to move my bishop, I'm going to castle. Classical chess. So, alright. Owen castles, White plays bishop e2, e5, the key move that makes a King's Indian work. The way this works is because you can't really take and expect to win a pawn. That's an important point. Is that after, say, takes, this doesn't work because of just knight takes pawn. When White is actually already worse. Especially if he tries to be fancy with a move like this. That will backfire horribly. Although, I'm wondering why. I'm sure there's a reason. I mean, I guess he could play. Yeah. Although White does have the 2 bishops here. I think White will find this to be a rather depressing position to have the 2 bishops in. So, alright. This exchange variation, by the way, does exist, but it exists without, of course, knight takes e5. White will sometimes play this move. Or though, not in this, sorry, here first, I think. But it doesn't matter, this is boring and stupid and ignore it. Alright, moving on. So e5, the key move that makes the King's Indian a King's Indian. And we get all this sort of fun stuff. So, alright, okay. Castles, knight c6, d5, knight e7. This position has occurred countless times. In the King's Indian. And the battle lines have been drawn, and all of the bromides have been said about this, that could be said about this. All of the trite things are true. It's like Han Solo talking about the Force. It's all true. White's gonna go like this and blah blah blah. Just blah. And black's gonna go brum, 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 brum. So there you go. There's the King's Indian. All right, so let's see how this plays out in practice. All right, so knight e1. This move is a nice, clever positional idea. You put the knight here, and then it supports c5. Also, it supports f3, bolstering things. So the knight's not particularly useful on f3 anymore. It needs to migrate to more prosperous areas. So okay, the horse migration continues for both sides. Black decides that also he needs to have his knight somewhere other than f3 so that he can do this. I find this opening a little comical in the sense that the king's knights are both useless and need to be moved to somewhere else immediately once the middle game begins. But okay. Sometimes black will not play knight d7, sometimes play knight e8. They both have reasons. But okay. I don't know. I don't know which I'd rather play. I don't play either side of this normally. Probably white scores a little better, but I'm not sure. So, alright. Knight d3. I probably would rather play the black side. Although, nowadays I'm not so sure. I kind of feel like I've become cynical in my old age. And so I feel like maybe white actually is a little better in these lines. But okay. They're fun. So knight d3, f5. Alright. Alright, bishop d2. At this point we get into theory. Now we get into hardcore theory. Until this moment, basically both sides, like almost anybody could play these moves because this position is so well known that, all these moves have been played so many times. But now we get into the little nuances that make the King's Indian so incredibly complicated. In this position, probably almost every conceivable legal move has probably been played at some point or another. Probably b4 has been played. a4 has probably been played. Rook b1 or something. Rook e1. Bishop g5. Bishop e3. f3. Maybe even c5 or queen to c2. I would guess that if you looked at a database, you'd probably find about over a dozen moves that white has tried here, all of which played many, many times. Because there's so many possible ways to approach this position. What white does in this game is, I think, a very, wait and see a little bit, sort of sly approach with bishop e d2. This is developing the bishop meaningfully, but not allowing f4 to come with tempo. This is important because if black immediately plays f4 here, he probably gives away a bulk of his kingside initiative to a move like bishop g4, when the light squares become a big thing. Or at least he's diffused black's ability to play on the light squares with a move like bishop g4. So, this is it's somewhat quiet, but with a dollop of poison. Or something. So, alright. So, knight f3. The knight returns now that the pawn has made its way to f5. f3, securing white's kingside. f4. Again, notice this move now no longer comes with tempo. Rook c1. The break on c5 is almost inevitable. g5, and now we have the pawn waves being very clearly established on both sides. c5, the storm breaks. The first contact is made. Alright, h5, knight b5. This is typical. Very typical. The knight wants to come to c7 and fuck things up. Also, the bishop on d2 suddenly looks very useful because it's coming to b4 and putting extra pressure on the d6 square. So this relatively inoffensive looking move of bishop d2 has already manifested itself, has already justified itself, because the bishop comes to the unlikely looking b4 square and makes its presence felt. So knight e8, very, very standard. The knight sits on e8 and defends as much as possible. What makes the King's Indian sometimes counterintuitive is, if we go back in time for a second here, I'll try not to digress too much about this, but black could have, originally, before all this mess started, black could have just stuck the knight on e8 to begin with. That would appear to have saved black a billion tempi, because the knight goes boink, then boink, then boink. That's 3 moves of the knight that are saved by simply putting the knight here immediately. Say we make the same moves for white in this position. And now black would have a free hand to make a million moves that he doesn't. Like, okay. My point is that black is up 1,000 tempi by dropping the knight back to e8 immediately. So it's interesting to me that black normally does not play this move, and my guess is the reason black does not normally play this move is because the knight actually is better on d7 in other lines, and maybe white could play here immediately or something, or I don't know, maybe. Well, after here, maybe, I don't know. There must be reasons why the knight does not just go back immediately to e8 and instead takes this weird route of there, and then to e8. But okay. In any case, in the game we have it going this way. Alright, and now bishop a5. Yeah, apparently knight e8 is bad, but it amuses me because the knight winds up on e8 in a line like this anyhow. So, okay, so white plays bishop a5. A dastardly conception, if I ever saw one. You definitely do not want to exchange pawns. This is maybe your best example in some ways of to take as a mistake. Because if you take this pawn, it will come back more powerful than you can possibly imagine. The problem is that this is really bad. The knight's really annoying. He might even play e6 and there, and if this e6 pawn is ever lost, it doesn't even matter because the bishop then becomes hyper good. And also, this is a huge weakness. You don't want to just capture willy-nilly. You want to try and maintain the pawn structure that you have as best you can. Alright, so bishop a5, and again, we've justified the bishop d2 move very well. I don't think black had a chance to play a5 preemptively. And also, a5 preemptively means that knight b6, b5 becomes even more annoying. I mean, basically for all intents, I mean, I think that a5 probably just pours oil on water, or pours oil on fire, or pours oil on something. I think there's a lot of oil if you play a5. I don't think you want to push pawns on the queen side as black here. All right. So okay, so b5, b6. Okay, I mean you have no choice here but to push with b6. So all right. Oh my god, what is going on? So okay, so white captures this way now, takes, and now withdraws the bishop all the way back to e1. I don't know why white didn't just drop the bishop here, but maybe he wants to play knight b4 and knight c6. Notice that the provoking b6 has already paid dividends because white can now play knight b4 and knight c6. So, so these are very clever little subtle nuances. Because, you know, there tends to be, especially beginners tend to think of the King's Indian defense as very, very crude. You just throw your pawns forward and try and checkmate. But notice all these little details that white has to kind of, you know, massage out of the position. Bishop a5, provoking b6 so that this square is weak to here and here. You know, there's a lot of little funky things. There's a lot of funny business. So, okay. So white's intending to go boink boink. So, okay, here we go with the throwing all the wood over to the king side as fast as possible on black's part. Knight b4 with evident designs. The computer loves white's position, and so do I. I mean, I know that Owen wins this game ultimately, but I feel like white has a much better position here. Yes, you get your standard nonsense, but look how advanced white is on his queenside play compared to white. Black has done nothing on the kingside yet. And white already has all of his pieces just flying forward. I mean, I don't believe in black's position at all here. But that said, it's a King's Indian, and King's Indians tend to be irrational. So, alright. a6. Knight c6. Just drop that knight in there. Queen d7. Now the queen is blocking his own bishop, or her own bishop, making it even more difficult to attack on the king side. Knight c3. I don't think knight c3 was as good as knight a3 and knight c4. But, I don't know. So, knight c3. Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument that this knight is a paper tiger. But, I'm more impressed with white's position. Alright, so b5, for some reason. Usually black doesn't bother making moves on the queen side unless there's good reason. But maybe there's... I trust in Owen's judgment that b5 has some purpose. So, okay, b5. Queen to b3. White is losing the thread with this move, according to the computer. And I suspect that there probably was something better. Oh, right. Owen was concerned about knight a4, which is indeed very annoying. Do you guys see how annoying that is? Because it's pretty annoying. Yeah, white's intending to play knight a4 with just running over the queen side completely. So, like, Owen really has no choice but to play here. But that makes me think that white could have simply played a4 now. Yeah, in fact, the computer loves this move. Just a4. And black's position is basically collapsing. I mean, you kind of have to take here or play knight c7. I mean, neither is good. I guess you could play knight c7. But this is pretty gross. Okay, now you could play here. I mean, The queenside can't be propped up in this kind of way. It's just not going to happen. So I mean, simple and straightforward moves for white on the queen side should win. At least it should win the queen side. The king side's another matter. Yeah, I mean, Owen, you'd probably be right not to. I mean, at this point, you might as well just ignore what white's doing. But okay. All right, so queen b3 instead. All right, so here comes the shit. All right, g4, a4. So white does basically what I'm suggesting. He just does it in a different move order. All right, so here comes g3. I'm just not impressed with black's attack here yet. I mean, yes, it's a little awkward. You can't just win pawns as white because then these dark squares become really obnoxious. Once these pawns are removed from the dark squares, the pieces take their place very frighteningly. So white kind of has to put up with some stuff here. But why can't you just play h3? Oh, don't take. Just play h3. Oh, that's apparently losing horribly to knight h4. And oh, okay. Yeah, this is the problem, is that white has no easy way to defend his king side. But, like, you know, with a certain amount of tradition, this. Okay, so h3 will lose in very, very short order, as you can see. This is a very instructive thing to know if you're playing white in these lines. And congratulations, you have just lost as white in a King's Indian. Alright, so white could just ignore, and after pawn takes, just play here. Like, what happens if white just ignores it? Maybe here. Oh, but you can't go there, because then here, now the knight doesn't have a square. Oh! See, these are subtle. So, what does black do now? The computer doesn't mind black's position here, so, like, apparently, I botched this a little bit. But I actually don't know how to play black's position here. Ugh. I mean, it all seems very crude. Here, I'll resort to the computer arrows. So the computer suggests knight here. Oh, because we're still threatening knight takes pawn. That's the whole point, is that black is threatening knight takes pawn no matter what. And now, after pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, g4, knight takes bishop, rook takes knight, and it's just a god-awful mess. Alright. So that's very interesting. So, alright. So this is a very serious threat. Is black is clamped down on this square and is just bringing his knight over. Now, white, the computer suggests a move of utter hilarity, which is king h1, and now after knight here, just defending it with the rook. And that's pretty freaking funny. But actually, this is a brilliant defensive idea on the part of white. Because now there's no simple way to break through as black. Black's crude methods are now totally ineffective. There's no easy way to get through now. And in fact, after pawn takes, I mean, yes, just king takes pawn, but you know what? You could even probably sack an exchange if you were feeling very, very fancy here. You could probably even play here and be doing okay. Yeah, this is just equal as far as the computer's concerned, but I mean, there'd be no reason why you should play this way as white, but like my point is you could even do that, but of course just king takes. And at this point, white is just flat out winning. In fact, white might have more of a kingside initiative than black. This is why I feel like white has the better of these positions. But you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful. You will have to see these ideas of knight h4 and takes. White in this game neglected to appreciate the strength of black's idea and paid the ultimate price. So, alright, so we have alright, so we have here pawn takes. The problem with this, again, as I said, is once these black pawns vacate, they vacate and pieces take their place, which is very scary. So as you can see, this is very, very frightening stuff. All of black's pieces are flooding into the position, and white's pieces are over on the other side of the board, incapable of mustering an effective defense. So rook c2, f4, bishop goes back there for some reason, knight, and okay, so black's pieces are coming in. They're all just coming in. This knight's probably going to go here and here, and the dark squares. Use the dark squares. Alright, so now white starts beating somewhat ignominious retreats, and that's usually a sign that the tide has turned. Much like the game we saw earlier, where white had a queenside initiative and then had to abandon it to tend to his damaged kingside. Same thing is happening here. White's operations have been halted just in the nick of time. And so these knights, this is bishop, and yeah, no, black has serious initiative now. Okay, queen g7. I don't know, that move looks weird, but apparently it's effective. Alright. And now white just panics. That's the problem. You can't panic as white in the King's Indian. You cannot panic. You have to just face your fears. And here white just freaks out and tries to bolt towards this side of the board. And this is where the seeds of his loss are planted. So, like, yeah, the king just freaks out. White loses his nerve. So, king f2, knight f4, king g1, but, like, come on. Now, I mean, the king's just, you can't just leave your king there. So, here come the knights. Yeah, I mean, even if white manages to survive, you know, any sort of immediate checkmate, like, he can't just, yeah, the position is just going to be so horrible because of the king here. So he run it away. But he's not going to get far. Yeah, knight g4 would have been a much better defense than any of this nonsense. Okay, so knight f5. And white's starting to stray more and more from the primrose path to salvation. And, yeah, I mean, black's obviously dominating. I mean, this king isn't really escaping. There's knights threatening to come to squares like this. There's undefended pieces all over the place. And he can't even win this pawn without activating black's rook. And he has no play of his own. So, this is bad. Alright, so g3, a move that makes absolutely no sense. I guess he was just, again, desperation and freaking out. So takes, and now he goes back that way. I don't even, now I have no idea what's going on, but it's silly. The knights are just, yeah, everywhere. White needs to download more RAM. So, oh, man. Yeah, I mean, white's just making moves now, but it's past any salvation. Oh, white traded off queens. That's something. And yeah, the end is nigh. So that was really well done by Owen. Basically, he created a a big initiative on the king side and white freaked out. One moral of the story here is don't freak out. Second is don't freak out. Because, like, that freaking out is what screwed white. Had white just held his ground, just, you know, instead of taking like that and allowing these pieces to come in, if he had just gone here, and then after this scary move, just go here, you know, you could do something like this, and then you're okay. Now you have the time you need to screw shit up on the queen side. But you can't see again. Environmental damage. White messed up his environment by taking and allowing all this pollution to come through. Look at all the billowing clouds of carbon dioxide that start appearing. There's methane everywhere, CO2. Like, I mean, all these emissions. It's just all the soot that's coming in. And he didn't have to do this. He could have, yeah. Kind of just could have gone just here and then clean energy or something. I'm not sure. That analogy really doesn't quite work, I think. But the point is that, yeah, you have to be very, very cold-blooded to play these positions as white. Yeah, especially against a tactician of the caliber of Owen Krowecki, sorry. So yeah. Okay. So those were very, very interesting. I can't look at all these games. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll put them in my file for later to look at. But I am going to upgrade my computer. Here, I'm saving these games. Z Nation's game. There. Alright. Actually, I want a tricky Chino chess. What? Let me see. He says this game completes me. I'm just curious. Ah! Crashed again. Oh, I'm sorry. My computer keeps crashing. I need to download more RAM. So, I'm going to go and do that. Thank you for following me as I try and say things that are vaguely instructional in nature. I hope we all learned something from this stream. Other than that, I probably should... yeah. I probably should... I don't know. Something. Yeah, I might play Hearthstone later. I should probably go eat some food or something. Is probably what I'm getting from this. And, or also get my apartment to have more heat. Because I keep sniffling. And it's cold. Alright.
Unbelievable.
Thank you for the follow, JG Dobby Hill. Okay, let me think for a second before I go. Okay. I'm not going to immediately upgrade my computer. The first step is I'm going to need to download Windows 7. No, I need to download Windows 10. So I'm going to make a stream where I'm doing that in case anybody can help me. And, or give me some advice about the solid state drive that I'm trying to install. So I'm going to shift the stream over to that. So I'll be back in about like a few seconds with that. But for those of you who are interested in this for its chess content, thank you for following. If you are either entertained or informed by any of what you are watching, please do feel free to follow me on my Twitch channel, which is what you are watching right now. And hopefully I will see you again with perhaps more RAM that I downloaded from the internet. Thank you very much. See you guys later. Bye.